refers to the absolute unity, the oneness of Allah. Now, many Muslim scholars have broken down Tawheed into three categories, into three subsets, specifically the Salafi Muslims. And I know I'm dealing with a lot of issues, but it's important to note that Islam, like Christianity, has a lot of groups. Salafi are Sunni Muslims, and they believe that their interpretation of the Quran and the Sunnah is the most accurate and consistent with how Muhammad, his companions, and the two generations after them implemented the Quran. So they believe that they are actually the inheritors of the original pure teachings of Islam, as taught by Muhammad, implemented by his companions, and the two generations after them, the first three generations. Well, these scholars have broken down Tawheed into three subsets. I'm going to be speaking about one of the subsets, but let me just mention it real quickly. And you can find more information on our websites. So if some of this stuff is going beyond some people, I encourage you to go to the websites. We document all these in our articles, and we break it down. So if I'm saying something that's not making too much sense because people are hearing it for the first time, go to answering-islam.org, answering-islam.org, and go to Brother David Wood's blog, answeringmuslims.com, answeringmuslims.com. Now, the three categories of Tawheed are Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. That means the unity of the sovereignty of Allah, that Allah is the only sovereign Lord. Rububiyyah, Rabb, like you say, Rabb al-Alameen, the Lord of all creatures. There's only one sovereign Lord, and that's Allah. You can't have someone else who is sovereign or Lord of all creation besides Allah, because this violates Tawheed. That's the first category. The second category is called Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, also called Tawheed al-Ibadah, the unity of the worship of Allah. Allah alone is to be worshipped. That's the second subset. Now the third subset, and I'm going to use this subset to show that if Jesus was a Muslim, then he's a bad Muslim. And you'll see why in a minute. The third subset refers to the nature, or I should say the names and attributes of Allah. It's called Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. The unity of the names and the characteristics of Allah. Meaning, that Allah has certain characteristics and names and titles that cannot be ascribed to any creature. This category says the exclusive characteristics and names of Allah belong to Him alone and cannot be ascribed to a creature. I'll give you an example. You can call someone Rahman, Rahman, merciful, but you cannot call him Ar-Rahman, the merciful.
Right.
When you attach the definite article before the word, then in its definite form, Ar-Rahman, the merciful, is a title that can only be ascribed to Allah and Allah alone. You with me there so far?
Got you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, but now I don't want to take too much time. Let me just give you two examples where Jesus claims for himself the very unique names and titles of God. If so, that either means that Jesus is a bad Muslim, or he is who Christians claim him to be, God in the flesh. For example, you have a Quran with you, do you not, Pastor Joseph?
Yes, indeed.
Turn to chapter 57, verse 3 of the Quran. Chapter 57, verse 3. And by the way, Pastor Glenn, this is a helpful verse because it ties in with your work with Jehovah's Witnesses, and you'll see the connection in a minute. In Surah 57, verse 3, if you're there, Pastor Joseph, could you read what the passage says?
He is the first and the last, the evident and the hidden, and he has full knowledge of all things.
Who's the first and the last again, Joseph?
He.
In the context, it's Allah, right? God, right?
Yeah, right.
So this is the title belonging to Allah, and it denotes the fact that Allah has been there from the very beginning and shall be there at the very end, because first and last affirms His pure existence, that Allah, or in our case, the true God, is pure existence. He's timeless, has no beginning and has no end. Therefore, because He has no beginning, He's been there from the very start. Because He has no end, He shall be there at the end of the age, right? So this speaks to His eternal nature, correct?
Yes.
Now, the Old Testament agrees that this is a divine title, and this is where it'll tie in with Pastor Glenn's work with Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'll read these passages for the sake of time, and if you want me to stop after this, I will.
Okay.
With respect to callers. But in Isaiah 44, verse 6, Isaiah 44, verse 6 says this, Thus says Yahweh, or in the New World Translation of Joe's Witnesses, Jehovah. Thus says Jehovah, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, Jehovah of hosts. I am the first, and I am the last. Besides me there is no God. Notice, according to the Old Testament, first and the last is a title belonging uniquely to Jehovah God. Again, Isaiah 48, verse 12. Isaiah 48, verse 12. Hearken to me, O Jacob, and Israel whom I called. I am he. I am the first, and I am the last. So clearly, the Quran agrees with the Old Testament. The first and the last is a divine title. No creature, if he's God-fearing, will ascribe it to his own person. Now, with that said, if I'm dealing with a Muslim, I'll turn him to Revelation chapter 1, verses 17 to 18. And Glenn should already know this, because I'm pretty certain he's used it with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
And if it's a Jehovah's Witness, I'll use the same argument. This argument works both for Jehovah's Witnesses and Muslims. And I read the first part of Revelation chapter 1, verse 17. Now, it's 17, 18, but this is what I do, depending on whom I'm speaking to. If it's a Muslim or Jehovah's Witness, I read verse 17, and I say, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. But he laid his right hand upon me, saying, fear not, I am the first and the last. And I stop right there. First and the last. If it's a Muslim, I ask them, according to the Quran, who's the first and the last? They'll tell me it's Allah. A Jehovah's Witness will say Jehovah. Then I ask, so who's speaking here? Muslims will say it's Allah. God is speaking. Jehovah's Witness will say Jehovah. Then I ask, okay, when did your Allah die? When did Jehovah die? They go, what do you mean? Let's finish the thought. Fear not, I'm the first and the last, and the living one. I was dead, and behold, I'm alive forevermore. This person, who claims to be the first and last, says he was dead and he came to life. Well, we know who that is, right? That's Jesus, correct?
Amen.
Why is Jesus ascribing to his own person one of the names of Allah? If he's a Muslim, wouldn't he affirm Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat and never dare to claim one of the names of Allah for himself? So then why did he do that? And by claiming to be the first and last, isn't this proof that Jesus is claiming to be eternal because he's been there from the beginning, will be there at the very end, and therefore must be God? So how can the Muslim Isa claim to be God?
Oh, it's excellent. And Brother Sam, you know, in the Arabic, in Surah 57, verse 3, he is the first and the last, referring to Allah, the third person, masculine singular. Huwa al-awwal wa al-akhir. And in our Arabic New Testament, in Revelation chapter 1, verse 11, Jesus says, قائلا أنا هو الأول والأخير. The very same word.
17 for us, too.
Yeah, and verse 17. Let's see. Verse 17. Verse 17. Do not be afraid, I am the first and the last. Let's see. أنا هو الأول والأخير. 100%.
So here's Jesus, because if you continue reading, he died, right? The person speaking said he died.
Yes, so, yes. So he said, and I am the right, and I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen.
So right there you have the historical Jesus, according to the earliest eyewitness documents written by monotheistic Jews. Jesus affirmed